There's a gentleman over here with the microphone.
My name's Robert Morris from the Knightsbridge Association. I'd like to support very much what the councillor has just said with regards to the inconvenience for neighbours that occurs. Sometimes you get the attitude that the home is someone's castle, but equally well, there's quite often in the terrace adjacent castles which aren't taken into account, the effect it has on those. I also understand that Camden Council, for example, has a paper which indicates subterranean development, what is possible and what is recommended. I also believe that the Royal Borough is also producing one or has produced one. Can I ask whether Westminster have done a similar exercise, or are they proposing to do one?
You're absolutely right. The Kensington and Chelsea have actually just recently produced supplementary planning document on basement excavation works, taking account of various situations, listed buildings, unlisted buildings, buildings in conservation areas, structural issues associated with that, quite a wide range of issues, and they've provided supplementary planning policy as to where these types of development will be appropriate and where they will be supported or where they may not be supported, and also they've given information on the level of supporting information in terms of structural supporting information that will be required before an application could even be regarded as a valid application. Clearly, this whole process of the LDF is where we identify where there are gaps, where we want to improve our policy, and so this is, I think, the opportunity to begin that process of developing supplementary planning document for that very form of development.
So you're going to do it, are you?
That's certainly part of the debate here tonight. If there's anything further that we can put in.
Can I, as a resident, suggest that you do it, please?
That's fine. I just wanted to note one point is, regardless of what we write, we still can't override legislation. So there are elements we have control over. There are also currently elements that we don't have control over. And the guidance that's been given by Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea and Camden, neither of those can override what we've said tonight. For example, if the basement development's wholly underneath the footprint of a building, they can't apply any further policy than we can.
Yeah, but the main problem, I think that the main problem occurs when you start doing it over gardens. And particularly I've seen in the area where I live, the whole of the garden is being paved over. That can cause water problems, as you well know, lighting from the fan lights, etc., that are needed. So there are guidance that can be given, and I would have thought that if you give guidance, then it's a high likelihood that the architect will take that guidance into account. So, once again, can I say, other boroughs have done it. I think it would be sensible if you did it as well.
Very similar piece of work. Thank you.
Could you comment on how you can justify giving retroactive planning permission?
Retrospective planning permission?
Well, in other words, somebody built something, an extension or a wall, and then you then sort of give it your blessing, not having in the first instance refused it, and then because for whatever reason that goes ahead, and then you receive a blessing from the councillor.
Can I try and respond to that? The law is quite simple, as the planning experts here will know, is that when you have an application for someone who has done something without consent, a retrospective application, the council has to consider it as if it was an application for someone who hadn't yet developed it. So the fact that they've done something without permission is not a penalty. It is not something you can make a decision on. You have to ignore the fact that they built it without consent. You have to say, with the plans before you, if they were coming to you, having not built it yet, would you grant this or wouldn't you grant it? And you may refuse it, you may grant it because you think it's acceptable. You cannot penalise the applicant because he's broken the planning rules and built it without permission to that stage. Now, I probably think you're right, that should be penalised, but the law does not allow us. And if we were to refuse an application because they'd already built it, even though it was an acceptable planning if they had come to us before they built it, we would lose heavily in the appeal, and we would lose costs against us. So it's the law that needs to be changed, and that's one of the issues we can certainly raise on debating it with government about what changes in law is required. But under the present law, that is not a criteria that we can consider.
But surely, I mean, that opens Augean stables.
Yeah, but that's the law, and we have to work within the law.
Yes, but then the law is an asked.
Lots of we can produce a list now if you want to of laws that are asked, but I'm not sure this is a place for that.
Can I raise the issue, because I think it relates particularly to extensions and alterations, and now with relaxation in the law from government with regard to the necessary planning permission to be obtained, and that is enforcement. It's a very difficult and it's a very long process, and people don't have the understanding, I fear, that they should have, because it is a very long... You hear it so frequently said, oh, but it could be conditioned, or it can be stated that this can't be done. And then when that is not taken into account and enforcement is required, it takes a very long process. And I wish more people could take that on board. The other bane of my life has always been in planning issues, why somebody will buy a 2-bedroomed house when they want a 6-bedroomed house with ensuite to each bedroom. Why, in the name of goodness, can't they find a property that meets their requirements rather than turning or trying to turn something which has been built in proportion with its neighbours and everywhere else, apart from the loss of open space, which is gradually being eroded in Westminster by these large extensions, because people aren't content with just a little small extension of, say, up to 2 metres. They're wanting to have something covering the whole of their back patio area, or it's not just a mansard roof. It goes way above that. And as I cite the example of someone buying a 2-bedroomed house when they wanted a 6-bedroomed house, just beats me.
Thank you.
Going back to underground excavation developments, I know we've seen quite a few in Mews developments where they've had no windows at all, and I wondered whether or not using building control legislation, for instance, not allowing air conditioners, for instance, because you would need permission for an air conditioner, but you could thereby render the basement useless because it has no daylighting and no air conditioning either, no ventilation. And the same thing when you're building over a whole garden, you could do it through the sustainability requirements of, for instance, drainage. And you can also use light pollution, because a lot of complete buildovers rely on roof lights for lighting, noise, light pollution to neighbouring properties, things like that. I mean, there are other ways you could that aren't permitted. For instance, air conditioners aren't permitted, are they? Or are they? I can't remember. Some cases they are permitted, some cases they aren't. But in our conservation area, I think air conditioners you still have to apply for, even if you can excavate, without permission.
Well, that's right. I mean, items such as roof lights, which obviously you wouldn't have a roof light if it was underneath the footprint of the building. But if it goes out beyond into the garden, beyond, depending on the form of the building and where it's sited, but if it exceeds what is permitted under permitted development, then it falls completely within planning control. And then if there are issues such as impact on gardens, impact on trees, loss of trees, impact of roof lights, impact of plants, that can all be taken into account then. And if there are issues, then they are potentially reasons why an application may be refused.